Attached to the end of this video is another video by Dominic Lee, who is a member of Hong Kong political party, where he addressed the United Nations Human Rights Council. His talk is about what happened in Hong Kong and about the double standards practiced by United States government. Please listen to it.
I would like to invite our next panelist, Mr. Dominic Lee. Mr. Lee is a member of the New People's Party in Hong Kong and also of the Civil Force. Mr. Lee, please.
As a native Hong Konger, born and raised here in Hong Kong, today I just want to share with you what I think about this legislation and some of the results we have seen this past year. Now, 2 years ago, under foreign influence, rioters went on the street, causing damage, vandalizing railways, blocking major roads in order to force the government to answer the demands. Now, don't get me wrong. Peaceful assembly and demonstrations are most welcomed in Hong Kong, where our freedom of expression is being safeguarded by our mini constitution, the Basic Law. It only became a problem when peaceful assemblies escalated into violent ones, where average citizens who disagree with the rioters' demand were basically beaten up, were burned alive, and even stoned to death. Businesses that do not agree with the rioters have petrol bombs thrown at them. So store got ransacked, got destroyed. The people of Hong Kong lived in fear for almost 1 whole year. And these are the truths, the reality that the Western media are not telling people about. It is really not until the national security law came into force last June, after the enforcement agency is equipped with the legal basis for cracking down on those illegal activities, that our beautiful city slowly went back to its peaceful form. Citizens of Hong Kong now feel safe to go out and not have to worry about being attacked, being hijacked or burned or killed, just because you share a different political stance. And companies now today are free to conduct business without worrying that the political stance will cost them financial losses. So, as a Hong Kong citizen and as an entrepreneur, the national security law has only made our life better. When we take a look at the situation in the United States, the American government adopts a gross double standard in legislation related to national security. When the national security law was enacted in Hong Kong last year, the US took an offensive stance, with former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo saying that it has destroyed Hong Kong's autonomy, and then went ahead to impose sanctions on our officials. And yet, if you take a look at America's own legislation, you will find more than 20 pieces of law that are related to national security, including Espionage Act of 1917, the National Security Act of 1947, the Central Intelligence Agency Act of 1949, the Protect America Act of 2007, just to name a few. So why is it okay for the United States to have their own national security laws, but it's not okay for Hong Kong and China to have ours? Is it that only the United States deserves to have their country secured, but not other nations? If you consider the fact that the maximum penalty for violating the security law in Hong Kong is only life imprisonment, while it's death penalty in America, then why is it considered a violation of human rights here in Hong Kong, but not in the United States? And mind you that, the national security law is not the only place where the US government displays the hypocrisy. The Americans also frequently adopt double standards in treating violent protests domestically and overseas, something that our national security law intends to protect us from. Just back in 2 years ago, in 2019, when rioters stormed the legislative body of Hong Kong, causing damage and attacking the police who were completely restrained, the US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called it a beautiful sight to behold. And yet, on January 6th of this year, when Trump supporters stormed the Capitol Hill in similar fashion, Pelosi called it an assault made on our democracy and an instigation to violence. So how can two events that are so alike of each other generate such a different response from that same person? And how can Pelosi make no comments about Americans' police brutality when the Capitol Police shot and killed a 35-year-old female protester? Her name is Ashley Babbitt, who was unarmed and doing absolutely nothing to threaten the officer at the time. Ladies and gentlemen, if this is not hypocrisy, I don't know what is. When I was studying at Rice University in Houston, Texas, in the US, right? There was this one time where Bill Clinton came on campus to make a speech. And in order to stop protesters from getting close to him, 3-meter tall barricades were set 200 meters away from the venue, surrounding the stadium. Police on horse with guns were patrolling inside the barricaded areas to make sure that no protesters could get even remotely close to Clinton. How is that for upholding the freedom of expression? And how is that for upholding the freedom to peaceful assembly? Here in Hong Kong, our police would have never done the same. In recent years, the American administration has failed in addressing some of the most important issues in their own country. The failure in combating COVID has caused over 600,000 lives to be taken away. And their failure in addressing racial discrimination has led to African Americans being killed by white police and Asian American women being assaulted randomly by Caucasian males. So why is the American government so consumed with legislation in other countries, but fail to make laws that protect minorities in their own country and eliminate racial discrimination? And why is the American government so consumed at supporting rioters overseas, but fail to address the demands of local Americans, leading to local protests like Black Lives Matter? And why is the American government so consumed with interfering with other countries' internal affairs instead of spending time fixing their own? So, American politicians, please mind your own business. Look into your own problems before pointing fingers at others. Because China is no longer the same nation that you bullied 120 years ago. And you have no right, absolutely no right, to speak to us from a position of strength. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Thank you, Dominic Ni.